Chapter 500, Delusion, 8. In front of Gavid were the doors leading to the 91st floor of Babel, the entrance into the Demon King's personal palace. While it felt like these doors could never be opened unless it was by the Demon King's will, Gavid felt no resistance when he tried pushing them open. Still, this would be his first time trying this. Gavid's mind was full of varied thoughts as he pushed the doors wide open. For the past hundreds of years, Gavid had never once opened these doors of his own volition. He had always kept to his office on the 90th floor. Although it was rare, the Demon King of Incarceration did occasionally send messages to Gavid. These messages mostly addressed Helmuth's political issues and never included any personal correspondence. The same also applied to Gavid. As the Archduke of Helmuth, he held jurisdiction over everything that happened within this great empire, served as the final adjudicator for all important decisions, and then sent the reports up to the Demon King of Incarceration. All of that was done without any face-to-face contact. Even for Gavid, as the Archduke and Blade of Incarceration, this would be his first time entering the royal palace without permission. No, in the first place, Gavid had never even knocked on the doors of the royal palace without a summons from the Demon King. The only times he had ever entered the royal palace were during events like the recent ceremony for the appointment of a new staff of incarceration. And even that was an exception among exceptions, Gavid thought to himself. That was the first time the royal palace had ever been opened to celebrate the appointment of a new staff of incarceration. In the first place, the focus of that atypical event hadn't even been the appointment ceremony. The Demon King's true purpose had been to gather up the top 100 ranking demon folk and proceed to weed out the undeserving. It was an amazing feeling. Gavid burst out laughing as he recalled those memories. Gavid could at least be certain of this much. After the war had ended, the Devildom became an empire, and the Demon King's castle was remodeled into this skyscraper. This would be Gavid's first time ascending to the royal palace of his own volition. But why was that? Why hadn't he ever tried to enter the palace before now? There wasn't any special reason for it. Gavid simply hadn't had any particular desire to climb up to those upper floors. After all, he didn't want to bother the Demon King of Incarceration needlessly. All of Helmuth, this entire gigantic empire, couldn't have even been established without the Demon King of Incarceration at its core. Helmuth had been able to develop incomparably faster than any other country on the continent because of the black towers that had been erected throughout the entire nation. These black towers, which could be considered one of Helmuth's many landmarks, received the dark power that was transmitted to them from Pandemonium and amplified it. This dark power was then spread throughout the entire territory through cables that had been buried deep underground. It was as if the entire empire was a parasite feeding off of the dark power of the Demon King of Incarceration. The Demon King was practically keeping the entire empire running all by himself. Gavid, in particular, was more aware of this fact than anyone else. "Please forgive my rudeness," Gavid said with a bow. After all, for the past hundreds of years, Gavid had been able to look down on the entire capital city from his office on the 90th floor of Babel. The Demon King of Incarceration was the one who had turned this Devildom into an empire and was also the one responsible for erecting the black towers and burying the cables underground. Most of the technologies that were currently spread throughout Helmuth had been gifted to the demon folk by the Demon King himself, who had thus managed to advance magical technology incomparably further than anything that Aroth, which boasted of being the kingdom of magic, had ever achieved. So then why had such a great Demon King stopped the war when he was on the verge of complete victory? Why hadn't he completely conquered the entire continent? Why build an empire seemingly designed to make the lives of humans more comfortable than that of the demon folk? Gavid didn't know the reasons for any of this. He had been curious, but he had never asked. Ever since the war ended 300 years ago, Gavid just kept his head bowed as he silently followed the Demon King of Incarceration's will. All that he had done was for the sake of the Demon King. As the Blade of Incarceration, he guarded the entry to the royal palace. As the leader of the Black Mist, he had trained the royal guard. And as the Archduke, he had devoted himself to working towards Helmuth's best interests. But that was why, even more so, Gavid felt that he had no choice but to do this. So even though he hadn't been summoned, he was opening the doors to the royal palace of his own initiative and entering the throne room without even asking for permission. He may have apologized for his rudeness, but he wasn't going to back down now. "Your Majesty," Gavid said as he lifted his head and looked up from the floor. The whole room was filled with a pitch-black darkness that stretched all the way up to the towering ceilings. No, rather than a ceiling, the roof overhead looked like the endless depths of the night sky. And in the center of that night sky floated a throne wrapped in chains. The Demon King of Incarceration was sitting on that throne, resting his chin in one hand as he silently stared down at Gavid. The moment that he saw the Demon King of Incarceration's face, Gavid unconsciously let out a laugh. Gavid hadn't asked for permission to enter. He hadn't even knocked and had just barged in without any warning. Yet even so, there was no sign of displeasure on the Demon King's face. There wasn't any irritation or anger either. The Demon King wasn't even showing any of his usual boredom. Instead, the Demon King was smiling as if he was amused. His eyes and lips were both slightly curved. Gavid let out a hollow laugh as he shook his head. Could it be that you don't consider my behavior to be rude at all? The Demon King's expression didn't show any surprise at his sudden entrance. Instead, he looked as if he had been greatly anticipating Gavid's arrival. And perhaps Gavid realized that might indeed be the case. Is there any reason for me to consider your behavior rude? The Demon King of Incarceration said with a laugh. You shall not enter the royal palace. I don't remember ever giving such an order. But perhaps my memory is flawed. Not, it is not. Gavid quickly shook his head in denial. You have never once given me such an order, Your Majesty. That means you were always free to come here whenever you wished, the Demon King stated firmly. Click-clink. The chains wrapped around his throne let out a clanging noise. And even if I didn't grant you the permission to come and go as you please, Gavid Lindman, if you were to open those doors and enter here of your own volition, I would not have considered it to be an act of rudeness, the Demon King added. But why wouldn't you, my lord? Gavid asked with a frown. Isn't the bond that has built up between us strong enough to pardon such daring behavior? The Demon King said with a grin. At these words, Gavid felt a huge shock as if he had just been struck on the head with a hammer. The bond between them? Had the Demon King of Incarceration really admitted to having a bond with him? How? Gavid began, then gulped. How dare I accept that Your Majesty could ever feel such a bond with someone like myself? The Demon King calmly responded, You have served me for a very long time. Click-clink. The chains made noise once more. The Demon King of Incarceration leaned his body forward slightly as he gazed down at Gavid and continued speaking. There are so many demon folk living under my rule that even counting them all is a difficult and burdensome task. All of the demon folk who live in this empire are my subjects, and all the immigrants currently living in the empire will completely transform into my subjects once their physical bodies expire. The Demon King of Incarceration might still have a smile on his face, but Gavid sensed the extreme boredom that was hidden behind his expression and voice. Boredom was the sole emotion that the Demon King of Incarceration had ever shown day after day, so much so that Gavid couldn't help but think that boredom was the fundamental emotion that lay at the heart of the Demon King of Incarceration. However, these casual words that the Demon King had just muttered out of apparent boredom carried enormous weight. As the Demon King of Incarceration had said, there were indeed countless beings who knelt beneath his throne. In addition to that, the Demon King of Incarceration could also place all those living on the continent under his rule whenever he so wished. Out of all those countless beings, you are the one who has served me for the longest time, the Demon King revealed. These words held extreme weight for Gavid. His shoulders began to tremble, feeling as if they were about to be crushed by the heavy weight at any moment. These words were also undeniably correct. Among the countless demon folk who served the Demon King of Incarceration, the demon folk with the longest span of service was indeed Gavid. Gavid was struck silent by this realization. Now that he thought about it, he should have already realized what he meant to the Demon King in the first place. In the present day, it was difficult to even count just how long ago it was that Gavid first became the Blade of Incarceration. That was just how far into the distant past their history stretched. Although this might be stating the obvious, Gavid wasn't born as the Blade of Incarceration from the very beginning of his life. Gavid Lindman was, in fact, born as a demon, one of the most common races of demon folk. The blade, the staff, and the shield of incarceration. These were the closest servants to the Demon King. Back in that long-ago era, every demon folk who held any confidence in their skills aspired to rise to those positions, and Gavid was no different. Time flowed past and many things happened. Gavid slowly climbed up the ranks step by step. At that time he didn't possess the demon eye of divine glory or his demon sword, glory. Nevertheless, Gavid had been strong. He wasn't pushed back in the slightest even when facing demon folk who were hundreds of years older than he was. As your majesty has said, I have indeed served you longer than any other demon folk, Gavid agreed. Just as he had always wanted, Gavid rose to become the blade of incarceration. Even before the opening acts of the war, Gavid had already been standing by the demon king's side as the blade of incarceration. And just as Gavid had done from a young age, there were countless other demon folk who had also aspired to become the next blade of incarceration. Since the end of the war, Gavid hadn't received any challenges for his seat, but hundreds of years before the war, Helmuth had been much more barbaric and reflective of a demon folk's true nature than it was now. Yet Gavid had never once had his seat taken from him. The staff of incarceration had changed hands several times. The shield of incarceration had also undergone a few replacements. However, since Gavid had claimed the title, the blade of incarceration had never once swapped places. Thanks to that, the blade of incarceration had even become his unique title. Even so, Gavid hesitated. 300 years ago, during the era of war, a death squad led by the hero Vermouth Lionheart had invaded Babel. They killed Eurogos, who had been the shield of incarceration at that time. They had also slain the staff of incarceration of that era, Belial. However, they didn't manage to break the blade of incarceration. Even though he had been defeated, Gavid had barely survived. For Gavid, this was still a disgrace. Since he had been defeated, he felt it would have been better for him to die on the spot. However, Gavid's life had been spared because the demon king of incarceration had ordered him to withdraw. Even though I have served your majesty for so long in the years since then, I still do not understand your majesty's intentions behind giving such an order, Gavid confessed. Why had he ordered Gavid to withdraw at that time? Why hadn't he allowed Gavid to die like he had deserved to after experiencing such a defeat? Why had he allowed Gavid to still claim the title of the Blade of Incarceration even after having been defeated? Why had the Demon King made such an oath with Vermouth when he didn't need to do so? Why hadn't he simply conquered the entire continent? And why had he shown such acceptance to the humans after establishing the Empire of Helmuth? And what on earth had been in that oath? Why haven't you killed Hamel? Gavid finally voiced his most urgent doubt. Among the many questions he had bottled up within him, he most desperately wanted an answer to this one. Your Majesty must have already long been aware that Eugene Lionheart is the reincarnation of Hamel of Extermination, Gavid accused. When do you think I first found out? The Demon King of Incarceration asked with a smile. Just because it's me, that doesn't mean that I know everything that is going on in the world. As for the reincarnation of Hamel Dynas, that is something I knew about in advance, but I didn't know the exact date it would occur. If it weren't for the bloodline continuation ceremony that raised so many noisy rumors, it would have taken me a while longer to find out the true identity of Eugene Lionheart. The Demon King of Incarceration slowly raised his head to look upwards. The only thing that could be seen in the direction of his gaze was the same pervasive pitch-black darkness. This was the top floor of Babel, the Demon King's castle and the Demon King's personal palace. So, the ceiling of this floor might be the closest ceiling to the sky, but it wasn't actually open to the sky. It wasn't just a coincidence that he was arranged to be reincarnated. From the very start it was all fated, the Demon King revealed. Gavid listened in silence. The Demon King continued his explanation. Vermouth wasn't truly the hero chosen by this era. Because Vermouth lacked the necessary capability to be that hero. The moment he heard these words, Gavid's cheeks trembled in shock. He recalled the various heroes from all across the continent that he had met less than an hour ago. Hadn't Gavid himself thought as much? If the heroes of today's era had been there 300 years ago, there would have been several more heroes apart from Vermouth and his comrades capable of slaying a demon king. If Vermouth wasn't the chosen hero, then, are you saying this era has been waiting for Hamel's reincarnation? Gavid asked in disbelief. I guess you could chalk it all up to fate, the Demon King of Incarceration replied with a slight smile. So who on earth was behind this fate? The name of a certain god naturally floated to the surface of Gavid's mind, the Light. If it was a fate that not even this great Demon King could truly control, was there anyone apart from a god who could be behind all of this, especially when it came to something like reincarnation? And the most powerful god in this world with the greatest number of believers, was the god of light. Vermouth must have arranged for the reincarnation, Gavid thought suspiciously. Vermouth had been the hero chosen by the god of light. At the same time, he had also been the master of that evil and sinister sort of destruction. A person of such duality, who had been considered the source of despair by the demon folk and the source of hope by the humans. Just what exactly was he hoping for with Hamel's reincarnation? But that's even more reason why I can't understand it, Gavid spat in a trembling voice. He now understood on a deeper level that it was this very era that had placed all of its hopes on Hamel's reincarnation. This current era was stronger than any other era that Gavid had lived through. It was even strong enough to threaten Helmuth, this giant empire that had been created by the demon king of incarceration by gathering together all of the demon folk's impressive strength, and that Gavid had been shepherding on the demon king's behalf. He is surely Helmuth's most dangerous enemy, Gavid accused. That is true, the demon king readily agreed. But your majesty, Gavid said with a note of protest. You promised Eugene Lionheart that you wouldn't attempt to kill him until he had managed to climb up to the top floor of Babel. That's right, the demon king nodded once more. Then before he starts climbing up Babel, Gavid paused, knowing he was about to ask an impertinent question. Am I permitted to go looking for him to take his life? Despite his reluctance to offend the demon king, Gavid couldn't bear not asking his question. Why should they allow Eugene, the hero, to climb up Babel uncontested? Someone who had clearly become their strongest enemy, someone who was becoming increasingly deadlier the more time they gave him. Why wait instead of just trampling him while he was weak? The demon king of incarceration just stared down at Gavid without responding. Gavid stared back, refusing to avoid his gaze. After a few moments of silence, the demon king of incarceration asked, "And if I didn't give you permission to do so?" "I will, of course, withdraw my request without any further questions," Gavid solemnly vowed. "Would you still be willing to serve as the blade of incarceration even after that?" the demon king probed. "Your Majesty is the one who bestowed upon me that title, as well as my demon sword and demon eye. Without any question, my sword is and has always been yours, my liege," Gavid loyally professed. The demon king grinned. "What about your position as the Archduke of Helmuth?" Gavid said gravely, "I will focus on preparing to lead us to victory when the war eventually breaks out." "And what about your position as just Gavid Lindman?" The demon king's smile deepened as he asked this question. This time the sudden question left Gavid speechless. The demon king raised a brow. "Whether it was opening the door to my palace and entering on your own or questioning me, wasn't all of that done by the will of Gavid Lindman? Not the blade of incarceration or the Archduke of Helmuth." Gavid held his tongue. "As a blade, all you need to do is simply follow your master's will. As the Archduke of Helmuth, all you need to do is follow your emperor's will and faithfully serve the empire. Neither of those two roles requires you to invest any of your own desires or will into them." Gavid continued to remain silent. "But what about you as an individual? Is it the blade that is seeking answers from the demon king of incarceration? Or is it the Archduke? Or could it be you yourself?" As the demon king of incarceration asked this question, he didn't give off any of that persistent feeling of boredom that had previously been exuding from him. His narrow, smiling eyes were filled with the rarely seen emotion of amusement, and even his low voice was filled with surprising enthusiasm. Gavid slowly prepared to speak once more. "I think he should be killed before he even arrives at Babel and starts his ascent." "Is it for my sake?" the demon king asked. "If I was just your blade, that is what I should say," Gavid admitted. "Is it for the sake of Helmuth?" the demon king asked once more. Gavid lowered his head. "If I was just your Archduke, that is what I could say." The demon king's smile deepened. "In that case, what about for your own sake?" "Yes," Gavid finally revealed the wish lingering at the bottom of his heart. "I want to kill Hamel. To satisfy the murderous intent caused by his humiliation at the hero's hands 300 years ago. I want to fight with Eugene Lionheart," Gavid declared. "Because of what he had seen in the battle earlier today. I want to face off against such a mighty hero personally." His voice was resolute. Gavid put aside all the questions that he had been bursting to ask when he first entered the royal palace. He was no longer interested in demanding their answers from the demon king of incarceration. The reason for Hamel's reincarnation? The reason why the demon king hadn't killed him? The reason for endangering the Helmuth Empire's well-being? Gavid ignored all of that as well as all of the countless other questions that he had for the Demon King. Instead, Gavid recklessly revealed the battle lust and fighting spirit characteristic of most demon folk as he said, "I don't want to meet him on the battlefield. I want to face him in a duel one-on-one." Chapter 501. Delusion 9. The Blade of Incarceration. Gavid knew just how honorable of a title it was. He himself felt proud to carry it. However, in a certain way he also felt repelled by this title. To be more precise, he didn't feel worthy of holding it. After the end of the war, the shield of incarceration had never been reinstated. This was because any shield that had already been broken through once by an enemy had lost all of its meaning. However, the staff of incarceration had been replaced. It wasn't because of Blood Mary but because the purpose of the role of the staff of incarceration had changed. It became a position that only the best human black wizards could ascend to, thus granting it great political significance. This told everyone that in the new Helmuth Empire, even the human black wizards could rise to higher positions. Unlike the other demon kings or demon folk, the demon king of incarceration wouldn't look down on the black wizards. The war had just ended. Peace was born thanks to the oath, but hatred for the demon kings, demon folk and black wizards had still been running rampant throughout the continent at that time. At the same time, many kingdoms were struggling to deal with the devastation left by the war, and countless people were left without any way to ensure their own livelihood. That was the cradle from which the empire was born. The demon king of incarceration had guaranteed that exceptional black wizards could find a position as one of his closest confidants. And after accepting large numbers of human immigrants without any restrictions, he provided them with a level of welfare that made them never want to return to the continent ever again. As for the Blade of Incarceration, that position was still left to Gavid Lindman. The shield had been broken and discarded. The staff had been repurposed for political purposes. However, the role of the blade didn't go through such a change. No, instead it was given even greater meaning than before. The Blade of Incarceration was further entrusted with the rank of Archduke. This meant that, apart from the Demon King of Incarceration, no one in the entirety of this immense empire could claim to hold a higher position than Gavid. The Blade of Incarceration also came to be regarded as the symbol of knighthood in Helmuth. Even when the shield had broken and the staff had fallen, the blade would not break and continued to protect its master. This loyal knight had fought for his lord without any regard for his own life. In the 300 years following the end of the war, the fact that the Blade of Incarceration hadn't switched positions even once added an even greater halo to the name Gavid Lindman. He held the record for the longest career as a knight in the entire history of the empire. He had held the title of Blade of Incarceration for the longest time, and he was also the only close confidant of the Demon King to have served for such a large number of years. No, Gavid couldn't accept such high praises. He hadn't broken. He hadn't fallen. That was all nonsense. The Blade of Incarceration had already been broken 300 years ago. The only reason the blade hadn't died like the shield and the staff had was that the Demon King of Incarceration hadn't allowed him to die. And he continued to bear the title of the Blade of Incarceration despite this failure because the Demon King of Incarceration had rejected his attempt to return the title. A duel, you say? The Demon King hummed thoughtfully. The request Gavid had just made went directly against the will of the Demon King. The Demon King of Incarceration had already declared his intentions long ago to the entire continent as well as to all of the demon folk of his empire, that he would be waiting in Babel for the hero to climb up and face him. If it were any other demon folk, it would have been fine for them to make such a request. Whether it was for the sake of their personal feelings, material greed, a desire for fame or hatred of the hero, even if it was just to take revenge for an old grudge over something that happened 300 years ago, it would have been acceptable. It didn't even matter if there were some other hidden intentions motivating their desire to challenge the hero. Because in the first place, the Demon King of Incarceration had been speaking as an individual and not as an emperor when he made his declaration. He didn't intend to enforce his decision on all of the demon folk in Helmuth. Therefore, if some other demon folk did act on his own and managed to kill the hero before Eugene could even reach the Demon King's castle, the Demon King wouldn't even show the slightest trace of regret. What the Demon King of Incarceration was patiently waiting for here in his Demon King's castle of Babel was the arrival of the true hero. He was waiting for the hero who would truly challenge the Demon King. He was waiting for a hero who could actually threaten the Demon King. If Eugene were to be killed by some ordinary demon folk, That would mean he had always been just another insignificant person who didn't deserve to be called the hero. However, the Blade of Incarceration was the only one not allowed to do such a thing. Just like the Demon King of Incarceration had said, a blade should simply follow the will of its wielder. Is it not enough to just kill him? The Demon King asked with that same smile. Although Gavid's request went directly against the will of his lord, the Demon King of Incarceration didn't seem to feel even the slightest trace of discomfort due to this. On the contrary, he was feeling such great amusement that he couldn't keep it from showing in his expression. It was just like the time with the specter. The Demon King of Incarceration absolutely loved irregularities. He was thrilled whenever he saw something he hadn't seen before during all of the many cycles he had experienced in the past. This was because all of these irregularities made him feel like this version of the world was something special and built up his expectations that it might truly be something unique. The source of this scene tent is fruevil.com. Gavid Lindman, I saw you try to kill Eugene Lionheart, the Demon King revealed. As he said this, the Demon King's thoughts turned towards the specter. He felt some sorrow for the end of such a unique existence. Born without any inherent worth, the specter had found the meaning behind his own existence as he faced his final moments. Until the very end, the specter didn't have a name. Nor did he want one. Yet even so, the Demon King would always remember him. Even if the specter had died as a nameless being, the Demon King would forever remember the Death Knight that had been born from Hamel's corpse, who had refused to don a name and instead called himself a specter. That is, these memories would last forever so long as the Demon King of Incarceration did indeed continue to live forever. I won't criticize any thoughts you might have had or what led you to act as you did at that moment, the Demon King said absent-mindedly. After learning a part of the truth, the specter had thought it over by himself and had reached his own conclusion. So the specter had chosen to test Eugene. That way, if he found that Eugene wasn't qualified, the specter could kill him personally. By doing so, the specter could ensure that the opportunity for salvation would be carried on to the next era. But was that the right thing to do? At that time it was indeed the right choice, at least for the specter. And that was enough for the Demon King of Incarceration. Why have you decided not to criticize me? Gavid finally asked. Because you chose to do what you did out of your own free will, the Demon King happily explained. Just like how the Demon King of Incarceration had only ever done what he felt was right for himself, he believed that others should also have the right to do the same. The Demon King of Incarceration also believed in having a transparent and respectful management style when it came to his subordinates. The Demon King continued, and I'm sure that you would have also taken care of dealing with the aftermath. However, in return for the transparency and respect he gave his subordinates, he also required them to take responsibility for their actions. After killing Eugene Lionheart and executing everyone else who happened to be there, you would have surely taken your own life, the Demon King said without the slightest doubt. Without showing any surprise, Gavid Lindman calmly returned the Demon King's gaze as he listened to this prediction. Soon, a wry smile appeared on his face as he nodded, Yes, my lord. However, you withdrew your sword just before you could deliver the blow. You changed your mind, the Demon King accused. Such decisive action was befitting of Gavid as the Blade of Incarceration. If he had made his choice to kill Eugene from his perspective as the Archduke of Helmuth, the Demon King of Incarceration would have also respected Gavid's choice. However, he didn't think he would feel as amused as he did now. Gavid Lindman, my most loyal knight, the Demon King fondly began. Although you have served me for such a long time, you have never once attempted to delve into the true intentions behind my orders. If you ever felt any doubts that you couldn't find the answer to, you would always just abandon such thoughts at that point. This is the first time you have ever pushed open those closed doors, entered the palace without obtaining permission, and sought an answer from me. Yes, that is true, Gavid admitted. Right now you seem truly desperate and eager. You have served me as the Blade of Incarceration for hundreds of years, but I have never once seen you so caught up in your own desires, have I? The Demon King inquired. Never, Gavid shook his head. So, is that how much? The Demon King of Incarceration rose from his throne mid-sentence. The countless, interwoven chains hovering behind the Demon King's back rose with him. You wish to fight Eugene Lionheart? Yes, my lord, Gavid confirmed once more. You said that you want to fight him using your full strength. If that's the case, there's no real need for it to be a duel, is there? That man, he will surely arrive at Babel eventually, the Demon King argued. Your Majesty, Gavid slowly lowered his head. If I were to wait for Eugene Lionheart here in Babel, there is no way he could give it his all in a fight against me. Ho! The Demon King guffawed at Gavid's denial, his smile growing even wider. His head still lowered, Gavid slowly continued speaking. He will definitely try to preserve his strength during our fight. And he might not even choose to fight me on his own. If it comes down to it, I'm not sure if he will prioritize his fight with me over ensuring his future victory. The blade of incarceration must always stand guard in front of the royal palace. That was also how it had been 300 years ago. After withdrawing from the Red Plains outside the castle, Gavid had readied the defenses and stationed himself in front of the palace. After successfully crossing through the plains, there were still many trials lying ahead for the hero and his companions upon invading Babel. All of the demon folk found within the castle could be considered true elites carefully selected from the entire population of demon folk. They were all genuine powerhouses with strength that didn't match their outer appearance or rank. They had gained such strength through measures that disregarded their health and even broke several taboos, leaving them all extremely short-lived. Apart from these guards, there was also the deadly and persistent array of traps, with the shield and the staff serving as the penultimate line of defense. Only by overcoming all of these tribulations could they finally arrive in front of the royal palace. 300 years ago, Hamel had died while they were attempting to surmount all of these obstacles. Even a saint's miracles couldn't be all-powerful or infinite in number. Continuous use of such miracles would leave even a saint exhausted. Likewise, an archwizard's mana wasn't infinite either, and the stamina of any warrior also had its limits. 300 years ago, among the group of humans who made it to the royal palace, everyone except Vermouth had been nearing their limit. This was all part of the plan. With victory as the goal, regardless of the process, there was no reason for Gavid to face them from the very beginning. For the sake of victory, the right thing to do was to tire out the enemy as much as possible. Though Gavid was still defeated in the end, that era wasn't an age in which one could complain that their opponent was a coward for doing what he needed to do in order to win. The same thing applied to the humans and the hero as well. Since he wanted to win, there was no way Vermouth could fight all on his own. Vermouth always had his comrades with him. Fighting together, the 5 of them managed to slay 3 demon kings before eventually reaching Babel. That seems to be the case, the demon king agreed with a smile. After entering the demon king's castle, the hero has to kill the demon king no matter what. Once he has stepped into the castle, we cannot simply allow him to leave or get a chance to rest. When Eugene eventually attempted to climb Babel, he would need to overcome many trials just to reach the entrance of the palace. Eugene Lionheart has already surpassed the strength that Vermouth possessed 300 years ago. He alone could have slain carnage, cruelty and fury, and even if the strength of Vermouth, Sienna, Anise, Molin and Hamel were all combined, he would still have been stronger than them, the Demon King said in an amused tone. There wasn't a single bit of exaggeration in those claims. Gavid also accepted the Demon King's evaluation without showing any surprise. Allow me to assure you, Eugene Lionheart is the strongest hero I have ever seen. Moreover, he has yet to finish growing. When he eventually attempts to climb Babel, he will surely be able to reach the entrance to my palace without receiving any serious injuries, the Demon King predicted. The Demon King of Incarceration slowly descended to the floor. The chains connecting him to his throne floated behind him like a cloak. At that point, I wonder how the battle between you two will turn out, the Demon King mused curiously. He will surely refrain from using ignition, Gavid replied confidently. He is also able to draw out a mysterious sort of light from his chest. I'm not sure what it is exactly, but what is clear is that it is something that he can't use more than a few times in succession. So I believe that he will also refrain from using that sword. If Eugene managed to defeat Gavid, he would immediately have to enter the throne room. As such, it would be absurd for him to use ignition in his fight against Gavid, as the technique required him to take a few days of rest after every use. He also wouldn't be able to wait for his divine power to recover after consuming all his uses of the divine sword. The Demon King of Incarceration would only continue to show his mercy while they were still outside of his castle. There was no way that the Demon King would grant them any reprieve once they had invaded his castle. So that means he won't be able to fight me with all his strength. He will surely receive some help from Sienna, and he might also accept the aid of the saint. He might even bring other companions with him, Gavid surmised. Gavid was thinking of Molan of Terror, who was currently guarding Lahanjar. That monstrous human had also managed to stay alive over these long 300 years following the era of war, and he had become much stronger. Molan wasn't the only one who might show up as one of Eugene's comrades. Gavid recalled the many heroes born during the present era he had seen in the desert. If they all accompanied Eugene together, then... I don't want my fight with him to be under such circumstances, Gavid said, shaking his head. He wanted a fight with Eugene like the one the Spectre had gotten. With Eugene rejecting the help of his companions, Gavid wanted to pit himself against Eugene purely as a knight, warrior, and demon folk versus another knight, warrior, and human. Without any thought of the consequences, he wanted to be able to fight Eugene with only the immediate thought of winning the fight in their minds. Gavid wanted to be capable of forcing Eugene to use ignition. He also wanted to make Eugene swing that mysterious sword at him without restraint. That kind of fight couldn't take place here in Babel, the Demon King's castle. And what if you kill Eugene Lionheart? The Demon King questioned Gavid. Gavid vowed, if so, I shall pay the price for disobeying your will, your majesty. Even if that requires you to pay for your mistake with your life? The Demon King asked as he landed in front of Gavid. If you are defeated by Eugene Lionheart, you will surely be slain. Whichever one of you dies, your station in front of my palace will still be emptied. The Empire will suddenly lose its Archduke, and the Black Fog will also lose their commander. Have you given any thought to what would happen in that situation? Gavid Lindman occupied a critical role in the functioning of the Helmuth Empire. If Gavid were to die, Pandemonium's entire administrative system would be paralyzed. I will start planning for that now, Gavid promised. Such words might seem irresponsible of him, but Gavid still said them without hesitation. To think he would actually end up hearing such selfish words from someone like Gavid Lindman. Such a reply only caused the Demon King of Incarceration to feel an even greater amusement. First, I will need to appoint and train my successor, Gavid murmured to himself. The first person that came to mind was Gavid's vice commander in the Black Fog. Not only was he excellent at his current job, but he also possessed exceptional fighting skills, so he should be able to fill Gavid's role, even if it were only temporarily. No, the Demon King of Incarceration shook his head. There is no need for you to worry about your successor. Gavid hesitated, but... There is also no need for you to return the Demon Eye of Divine Glory or the Demon Sword Glory to me either. The Demon King spoke over Gavid's attempted protest. Gavid's cheeks twitched as he held back his words. A duel with Eugene was something that was solely motivated by Gavid's selfish desires. As the Blade of Incarceration or as the Archduke of Helmuth, it wasn't something he should be aiming for. So whether he won or lost either way, Gavid was willing to give his life for it. As such, Gavid had intended to give up the title of Blade of Incarceration before committing to such a folly. He had also been planning on returning the Demon Sword Glory as well as the Demon Eye of Divine Glory. Aren't you being a bit too arrogant? The Demon King asked with a snort, raising an empty hand into the air. The hilt of a sword appeared in his empty hand. It was the hilt of the Demon Sword Glory, which Gavid had left in his office. Without your Demon Eye or Glory, do you really think you could duel a hero with just your body alone? The Demon King asked skeptically. Gavid couldn't respond. You are the Blade of Incarceration, the Demon King reminded him as he slowly lowered Glory until the sword was touching Gavid's shoulder. Gavid bowed his head deeply. I understand, Your Majesty. The Demon King nodded in approval before saying, You'll need to take some time and adjust your state. Yes, after all, it's been a long time since I was last in a duel, Gavid readily agreed. Allow me to give you some help, the Demon King offered. Click-click-clink. One of the chains hanging behind him lifted its head. The Demon King of Incarceration tore the whole chain off at its root. The chain shook wildly in front of Gavid, then twisted itself in coils until a heavy bundle of chains was left floating in front of Gavid. Use this once you return to your mansion, the Demon King instructed. Yes, my lord. Gavid politely accepted the gift with both hands, not asking any questions about the true purpose of the chain. Without saying anything more, the Demon King of Incarceration simply let go of Glory. As he did so, Glory reappeared on Gavid's waist as if it had been hanging there from the very beginning. Are you hoping that I win, Your Majesty? Gavid suddenly lifted his head and asked. He watched as the Demon King of Incarceration floated back into the night sky, almost appearing as if he was being dragged upwards by his chains as he returned to his throne. "No," the demon king of incarceration answered him truthfully. "I hope that you are defeated and slain. Only then will the hero be able to attempt the climb up Babel." Gavid didn't feel displeased or disappointed by such an answer. Instead, he actually smiled brightly out of a sense of relief. "Understood, my lord." The moment Gavid finished his response, the darkness around him suddenly withdrew. Gavid had just been standing in front of the royal palace, but he now found himself somewhere completely different. He wasn't in his usual office either. He was standing at the front door of a mansion which gave him an unfamiliar feeling. This was actually Gavid's personal mansion, which he rarely ever used. Gavid let out a snort and turned his head. Not far away he could see Babel towering up into the air, looking as if it was supporting the entire night sky. "I didn't get the chance to ask him about his true intentions," Gavid muttered. But that was just how the Demon King was. With a chuckle, Gavid opened up the front door and headed inside. Chapter 502, Brilliance 1. The 90th floor of Babel, the Duke's office, was enveloped in darkness. Duke Gavid Lindman, also known as the Blade of Incarceration, had formally declared an indefinite leave of absence. In the 300 years of the Empire's history, he had moments when he temporarily stepped away from his duties, but never before had such an absence been officially announced. Moreover, it was an indefinite leave of absence. The announcement did not specify a return date or delve into the reasons behind this decision, citing only personal circumstances for his departure. The sudden news sent shockwaves through the Empire's media. It even caught the attention of the international press. An understandable reaction given that Gavid Lindman had effectively been the de facto ruler, handling the emperor's duties for much of the empire's 300-year history. The emperor, the Demon King of Incarceration, seldom left the throne room except for special occasions. He engaged little in the day-to-day governance that other kingdoms and empires might expect of their rulers. This task had traditionally fallen to Gavid Lindman, with the Demon King of Incarceration only reviewing the reports and decisions the Duke had made. However, this arrangement didn't make the Demon King of Incarceration a mere figurehead. Nothing in the Empire could proceed without his explicit consent, and his wishes were commands that underwent no debate or discussion. Duke Lindman's role was that of a bridge between the secluded Demon King of Incarceration and the Empire's bureaucrats. Hence, his leave introduced a wave of unease not just among the bureaucrats but also among the Empire's populace. Though his absence was deemed unavoidable, the vacancy he left demanded a proxy. Someone else needed to step in to shoulder the immense responsibility in his stead. Duke Giabella's name was swiftly brought up in discussions. Her public image was favorable, and her savviness in matters of state and commerce was renowned. If the Empire, or even the continent, were to nominate its most distinguished entrepreneur, Duke Giabella's name would undoubtedly surface among the primary contenders. Yet Duke Giabella showed no inclination to step into the limelight in either the capital, Pandemonium, or the imperial palace, Babel. She carried on with her life as if the affairs of Pandemonium bore no relevance to her, as if she wouldn't intervene even if issues surfaced in the capital. It felt as if she were indifferent to any potential crises that might arise. It was possible that Duke Giabella might be harboring other intentions, but to the public eye her routine remained unchanged from before. She continued to reside within the tranquil bounds of Giabella Park. She would occasionally take to the skies in the Giabella face to bestow dreams upon the people when whimsy struck her. She graced the festivals of Giabella Park with her presence and was a familiar figure in the park's clubs and pubs. "Who in the world is Count Arnott?" Eugene grumbled while shifting his gaze downwards. The tantalizing daily spectacle of Duke Giabella. Trivial gossip. The Duke was captured in photographs wearing a dress that revealed the entirety of her back and smiling radiantly at the camera. Eugene consciously averted his thoughts from the necklace that adorned her delicate neck and the ring on her gesturing hand. "He's one of the officials in Babel. More specifically, he is assigned to the Ministry of Planning and Finance's Planning Coordination Office." "Is he strong?" Eugene interrupted abruptly. His interest seemed piqued as he turned sharply with a gaze narrowed in scrutiny. "His rank is not particularly high. As far as I remember, Count Arnott is ranked 103rd, or he would be if there hadn't been any change." Balzac Ludbeth calmly redirected Eugene's gaze with a serene smile. In Babel's public service, rank isn't everything, explained Balzac. Well, that must be true. An empire couldn't be run by brute force alone, even if it's one comprised of demons, responded Eugene. Indeed, you speak the truth. Balzac bowed slightly in agreement under Eugene's scrutinizing gaze. 10 days had passed since the conclusion of the war in Horia. While efforts to rehabilitate the ruins were ongoing, most of the Liberation Army had departed the battlefield and returned to the nearby city of Sala. The Liberation Army hadn't disbanded yet. Unlike the battles that were fought across the seas, this war had been waged within national boundaries. As such, it necessitated a multitude of settlements post-conflict. Moreover, the victory in the war had been overshadowed by a bombshell declaration. Wouldn't it be convenient for you to return? Eugene started while putting down the newspaper. It seems like staying here would be more of a hassle for you. Are you worried about me? Questioned Balzac. Why? Is it so strange for me to worry about you? Eugene retorted. No, it's not that. I'm just overwhelmed with gratitude. To think that a black wizard like me could receive concern from Sir Hamel himself. I don't know what to say, said Balzac. Are you mocking me now? Eugene questioned. No, not at all. It's just such a surreal, unexpected thing. I didn't want to be conscious about it, but it keeps occupying my thoughts, Balzac said while lifting his head with an awkward smile. Balzac continued, getting back to the topic. Count Arnott isn't particularly distinguished among the demons within Helmuth or even in Babel. Frankly, he's just one of the many average demons you'd find in Babel. Of course, being a count and an official of Babel isn't exactly ordinary, but... He's not cut out to act as the Duke's deputy? Eugene questioned. Correct, answered Balzac. The Ministry of Planning and Finance is essentially under the Duke's direct control, isn't it? Eugene asked. Strictly speaking, all departments in Babel report directly to the Duke, Balzac corrected. Eugene shook his head in honest admiration. Eugene had thought of the Blade of Incarceration as nothing more than a skilled fighter, but it appeared he had been handling much more in the Empire. I haven't assessed Count Arnott's work efficiency, but he must possess the necessary skills to have been chosen for this position, Balzac suggested. Eugene's gaze returned to the newspaper. It had been 10 days since Duke Lindman left the office, yet remarkably nothing significant had occurred. The Empire's governance faced no issues at all. Although Gavid Lindman stepped back from all his duties in Babel, nobody felt his absence. Count Arnott, who suddenly ascended to the 90th floor office as the deputy, was managing the tasks flawlessly. Could he be an avatar of the Demon King of Incarceration? Eugene asked. It's not just a possibility. I'm convinced that's the case. Otherwise, it would be impossible to perform so perfectly overnight as well as he would, Balzac responded. Count Arnott, a demon of not a particularly high rank, was indeed a real figure. However, whether the current Arnott was in his right mind was debatable. If the Demon King of Incarceration had chosen him as an avatar to manage Gavid's duties in his absence, what could possibly require such a favor? Eugene muttered in discontent while furrowing his brows. This was no simple leave of absence for Gavid Lindman. What could possibly compel him to suddenly leave Babel and withdraw to his estate? And why would the Demon King of Incarceration go to such lengths to accommodate Gavid? Could he have been removed? The sudden thought made Eugene turn to Balzac. 10 days ago, Gavid had abruptly attacked Eugene. He had seized the moment when Eugene was immobilized by the aftereffects of ignition. He had aimed to slit Eugene's throat. He had not necessarily failed. Gavid had sheathed his sword and engaged in a dialogue with Eugene before withdrawing. However, Gavid's intent to kill was real and went directly against the wishes of the Demon King of Incarceration. A removal? Balzac pondered for a moment. That possibility cannot be dismissed. His Majesty, the Demon King of Incarceration, always demands accountability for one's actions. Haven't you seen it before, Sir Eugene? Are you referring to the incident with Euad? Eugene asked. Yes. The incubus that seduced Euad Lionheart, though it's likely that Duke Giabella was behind it. However, she never emerged in the public eye, resulting in only the incubus's death, continued Balzac. The Demon King of Incarceration had ordered that execution. Duke Lindman defied the Demon King of Incarceration in attacking you, Sir Eugene. That act alone could be deemed a sufficient crime warranting punishment by the Demon King of Incarceration. However, if Duke Lindman had been removed, there would be no reason to conceal such a fact, stated Balzac. So, in conclusion, you're saying you don't know? Eugene asked. Correct. If you wish, Sir Hamel, I could personally visit the Lindman estate in Pandemonium to verify the Duke's status, suggested Balzac. That won't be necessary, Eugene responded with disgust. And stop calling me Hamel. Understood, Sir Eugene, answered Balzac. How are you feeling? Eugene asked while scanning Balzac. Balzac was pale to begin with, but he appeared even more wan now. His cheeks were slightly sunken, making it appear as if his glasses were too large for his face. His arm, infused with gluttony, was tightly wrapped in gray bandages. There seemed to be nothing out of the ordinary, yet something indefinable lingered about Balzac. After all, he had feasted on numerous gnur as well as demons and monsters. The digestion is proving difficult, answered Balzac. If you're feeling sick, maybe you should throw up, Eugene suggested half-jokingly. Haha. It's something rare to come by, so I guess I need to force it down, answered Balzac. Has there been any word from the Demon King of Incarceration? Any orders to return? Asked Eugene. Thankfully, nothing so far, responded Balzac. Perhaps to keep an eye on me? Eugene asked probingly. Aren't you already aware, Sir Eugene? The Demon King of Incarceration has no need to use me as his eyes, Balzac said while rising from his seat. He had been summoned for a private meeting with Eugene for the first time in 10 days. He wanted to ask many questions such as about death, reincarnation, Vermouth Lionheart, the upcoming wars and Eugene's fated tasks. But Balzac didn't ask any questions. He kept all his burgeoning queries to himself. Balzac knew his place well. As a black wizard, he understood he could never be friends with Eugene. He had harbored a sliver of hope before, but he deemed it impossible after learning that Eugene was the reincarnation of Hamel of Extermination. He pondered if it was permissible for them to maintain their current relationship. Balzac smiled. This level of detachment suited him, and he was grateful not to be regarded merely as an enemy. Well, I'll be taking my leave then, he said. Although Eugene hadn't explicitly asked him to leave, Balzac was quick on the uptake. His summons and the quasi-conversation that followed were prompted by Eugene's curiosity about Count Arnott. And now that discussion had concluded. Will you stay in this city? Eugene called out to Balzac as he began to withdraw. Or will you return to Arath? I won't stay in this city. Nor will I return to Arath, Balzac answered. Why? Didn't you enjoy working with Sienna and the other wizards? Eugene asked. That position was like a miracle or a blessing to me. But now it's a place I must not occupy, responded Balzac. Then where will you go? Inquired Eugene. I plan to wander for a bit, Balzac answered. Should he track Balzac? Mark him? Eugene contemplated momentarily. Right. Eugene was certain they would meet again. With that thought, he nodded as Balzac left his room. Surprisingly, the first thing Eugene did was to sigh as the door closed behind Balzac. He leaned back in his chair as far as it would go and propped his feet up on the table. He then tilted his head back and closed his eyes tightly as if to release his tension. I must be crazy, he muttered to himself as he opened his eyes again. The stack of newspapers on the table caught his eye. The articles he had been deliberately ignoring were now in plain view. Shock. Eugene Lionheart's identity. The reincarnation of Hamel Dynas. Why did the demon kings who sought to conquer the continent and enslave humanity 300 years ago fail? The brilliant Eugene Lionheart. Helmuth is shocked by his incredible identity. The current state of pandemonium. Everyone is reeling from the shock of Eugene Lionheart's identity. Why did the Blade of Incarceration disappear right after the Liberation War of Horia? Don't hide. Stupid Hamel, but Hamel of XX to the demons? The true identity behind the name feared by demons. Why Helmuth's demons are in turmoil right now. Please, no more wars. An honest conversation with an anonymous high-ranking demon for the first time across the continent. Memoirs of the era of war published in Helmuth but suppressed from sale. I Survived Hamel. Efforts to restore parts of the censored manuscript. Why did the Queen of Nightmares, Morgia Bella, have a secret rendezvous with Eugene Lionheart? A persistent rivalry, or love? Red heart unreleased photos of a romantic date in Giabella Park. Ugh. Eugene felt his head spin as he read the headlines blazoned in dramatic fonts. What in the world was? The most unbearable among the articles were those regarding Noir. Why were they using ellipses? Why not just finish it by saying they were enemies or rivals? And why in the world had they inserted a heart? Romantic date? Unreleased photos? I must be losing it, he thought. His head was spinning. This chapter is up.d by freewebnovel.com. Yes, it had been madness. He had gotten carried away. He declared himself as Hamel because of the heat of the moment. No, but it could have been managed then. If he hadn't declared it once more in front of Gavid Lindman, if he hadn't proclaimed himself as Hamel in front of everyone, then these damned articles wouldn't have surfaced. Arg. Unable to contain himself, Eugene shot up from his seat. The chair clattered behind him, but Eugene was oblivious to such sounds. His ears were filled only with the thumping of his heart. They were pounding with shame and rage. Eugene reached out towards the newspapers piled on the table, unaware that his face was as red as beets. With a whoosh, flames ignited as furious as Eugene's emotions, and consumed all the newspapers in sight. But what was burned was only the newspapers in this room. The papers had been published days ago and had already spread across the continent. He was certain. At least half the continent's population had seen one of these articles by now, and nearly everyone would know Eugene as the reincarnation of Hamel. Arg. Eugene screamed again while clutching his head. He could now slightly understand why Melkith El-Haya would emit cries reminiscent of a crow's screech whenever given the chance. It was because she simply found it impossible to maintain sanity, hence the screams. Why do you keep making strange noises? The door burst open. He stopped tearing at his hair and wailing midway and turned to look, only to be left speechless. And what was that supposed to be? The incongruous sight of Mare and Rhaenyra dressed in suits met his eyes.